evening. Tonight is the 2021 Bethany Mayoral Candidate Forum. We're here at the beautiful Bethany Public Library to hear from the candidates for mayor in the February 9th election. And we're delighted tonight to have Ted Strueli as our moderator. Ted is currently the executive director of Oklahoma Watch, and for 14 years was the associate publisher and editor of the Journal Record. He has a long list of participation in leadership on volunteer boards across Oklahoma City, and has also received many awards for journalism from the Society of Professional Journalists, has been given the Carter Bradley Award for his extraordinarily strong efforts to preserve and strengthen the First Amendment, as well as from the Oklahoma Business Ethics Consortium for promoting ethical standards for their professions and our community. We're delighted to have Ted Strueli as our moderator tonight. And with that, we are ready to begin the 2021 Bethany Municipal Candidate Forum for the office of mayor to be elected on February 9th, 2021.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Jill. We want to be sure to thank the Northwest Chamber for hosting this event, and to the Bethany Library for graciously giving us space to produce this stream. We're here tonight to introduce candidates, the incumbent and the challenger. We're going to give both of them an opportunity to introduce themselves to kick off the evening. So with that, we'll get started, and the challenger, Nikki Phipps, is drawn lots to go first, so we'll start with her opening statement.
Good evening. My name is Nikki Phipps. I've been a resident of Bethany for about 7 years now, professional communicator for about 20, professional writer for 25, so I've got a long history in communication. I sit on the board for the American Marketers Association, and I was previously actually the PR director here in the city of Bethany. I'm running because I'm a concerned citizen, and I think that if you don't like what you see in your city, then you need to step up and do your civic duty. That's why I'm running.
Thank you. Mr. Westmoreland.
I'm KP Westmoreland. I'm currently the mayor of the greatest city on planet Earth, the city of Bethany. I ran 4 years ago, much like because of what Ms. Phipps stated, that if you didn't like what you saw in your community, you should step up and do something about it. I ran 4 years ago and was blessed enough to be able to be voted into this position, and we have strove to try to make as much progress as possible. We have definitely made mistakes. I have made mistakes, but we've also made progress. It's been challenging, sometimes extremely challenging, but I think that's what grows a person. I know it's grown me. I think it is ultimately going to grow our city into a better city.
All right, thank you. Mr. Westmoreland, we'll start with you with the first questions. You have 60 seconds to answer. What do you believe the role of the Bethany mayor is?
I think the role of the Bethany mayor is to, first of all, tell the truth, stand up for what you know is right, because the citizens voted you into this position. And if there's any injustice, to speak up and not turn a blind eye. And I've tried to do that on all accounts. But I think the role of the mayor in our form of government is to be a spokesperson and to ceremonial kind of be the head of the council and the city, but in all reality, you are one vote on this council, and that is essentially you are part of a team, and that team is the Bethany City Council.
Okay. Ms. Phipps, 60 seconds. What do you think the role of the mayor is in Bethany?
Well, I think in a city manager-run city like Bethany is, it's largely a figurehead position. It's one seat on the council. And really the mayoral seat, I think, sets the tone for the meetings and the attitude. And so that is an important element of it, but it is, like he said, just one vote of 9.
Okay. Ms. Phipps, next question to you. If you talk to Bethany residents, they list many things as top priorities: parks, trash, water, sewers, streets. Of those, which 2 do you think are most important, and what should Bethany be doing in those areas?
Infrastructure, I think, is one, which streets would fall under. Parks are great, and I love them, but I think that they're not a necessity necessarily at the top of the list. I think as far as where the budget's at right now, infrastructure is probably one of the biggest things that has to be focused on in the moment. CIPs are a good way to work on streets and other infrastructural improvements like water mains and things like that. Good example would be Ward 2. There's a lot of issues with aging lines in Ward 2, and I believe they just had an emergency meeting the other night dealing with one of those emergency issues. So I think that there are several different things that you could do. Bond issues are another great way to do that, to kind of deal with those issues. And then a special tax district, if you have an area that has a specific issue that the rest of Bethany doesn't have. But I think that's just a couple of different options that we could use to improve infrastructure.
Okay. Mr. Westmoreland, I'll give you the list again, and then you have a minute to pick two and tell us what should be done in those areas. We saw the top priorities as parks, trash, water, sewers, and streets. Talk about two of those and what Bethany should be doing.
Well, everybody knows that I'm passionate about economic development because the state of Oklahoma is the only state in our country that we do not get any part of the ad valorem tax. We are the lifeblood of every municipality in Oklahoma's sales tax. And so that's something I'm passionate about. However, I think the top two is infrastructure, for sure. We did have an emergency meeting the other night to be able to repair something that definitely needed to be repaired. What a lot of people don't know is that we've been addressing these things for 4 years. We, to date, over the past 4 years, have invested nearly $4 million into infrastructure rehab, repair, and upgrades. And so that's with lift stations, transfer stations, and sewer mains and things like that. So we are well on the way of trying to address these things, but there needs to be a 10-year plan to address these things long term. Also, water. We inherited a 12-year water lawsuit, contamination lawsuit, and we got that settled. We have secured $3.5 million for future water needs.
Thank you. Mr. Westmoreland, you also get the next question kind of on the same topic. Would you vote to raise water, sewer, or trash rates in 2021?
Absolutely not. We obviously raised the utility rate recently, and then we lowered it as soon as the pandemic hit. And we lowered it to $16, and that's where it needs to be. I think all the studies that our former city engineer did kind of put it at that mark, and it never should have gone to $30 where we voted that in after a budget fear and scare, but we quickly lowered that down 4 weeks later to $16. And there's some areas in issues in utility billing that we have to address because there's some hiccups there that we're talking about right now currently that we have to get fixed because it's frustrating when you're getting your bill after your due date is come and gone, and there's just things like that that we've got to address, and that comes with policies and things of that nature.
Ms. Phipps, would you raise water, sewer, or trash rates in 2021?
Absolutely not. I think especially considering all of the issues that we're having with trash and water and everything else right now, that would be completely unfair to ask residents. Additionally, I think water rates weren't raised. I think 2010 was the last time, but the issue with that is that generally it increases by an average of about 2% every year. But because there was such a long time frame in between 2010 and now when they were recently raised, there was a huge jump all at once, which largely affected so many citizens on fixed incomes and things like that. That's a huge increase. And if we had followed that 2% annual increase, it would have been about a $12 increase at this point. So we've kind of gone beyond with the $16 rate increase. We've gone above and beyond that. So I wouldn't be a proponent of an increase for several years. And after lengthy discussion about how to correct and fix the issues that we're having right now, especially with trash and big pickup and things like that.
Okay. Next question goes to Human Resources and goes to Ms. Phipps first. What does the City of Bethany need to do to attract and keep quality staff, including the city manager?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is ensuring that charter is followed and allowing the city manager to do their job. There's been, as we all know, a high rate of turnover in city managers and also staff as well. So many departments are down many employees, and you lose so much institutional knowledge whenever they leave, and some of them had been here for decades. So I think that you have to have an attractive working environment, not just with financial incentives. Financial incentives are not what keeps an employee happy and fulfilled every day in their job. It's knowing that they can come to work, not be harassed, do their job and do it well, and be able to receive credit for a job well done and not have to worry about retribution of any kind. And so I think ensuring that the city is following charter, that the city manager can run the city appropriately, and that the staff can come to work and do their job each and every day and be proud of it and not worry about things that they shouldn't have to be worrying about.
Okay, Mr. Westmoreland, what does the City of Bethany need to do to attract and keep quality staff, including the city manager?
In regards to the city manager, it's no secret that we've been through quite a few city managers. Most of them department heads that knew they were filling it temporarily. We had Chief Cole, our police chief, and at that time we were looking at possibly hiring him when he retired. But the people of Bethany voted and decided they did not want a city manager living outside the city limits, and so that eliminated him. But I think what Ms. Phipps said is true. However, there's a lot of things being said about staff being harassed, and that's just simply misinformation. I think definitely the city manager needs to be allowed to do their job. We have a great city manager right now in Elizabeth Gray. She's doing a fantastic job. She's a joy to work with, and she's helping get a lot of stuff done. And I think because the city manager is the head of all the staff, that's really where they're going to lead the way of being able to make it a nice work environment.
Okay, thank you. Next question, back to you, Mr. Westmoreland, and we'll stick with 60-second answers for now unless we start running behind. What would you do to build a positive working environment with the council, city staff, and Bethany residents?
I think a retreat would be very good to have, to where we could all get together and share kind of our passions and what we're passionate about and what our goals are and what we think needs to be happening, because I think everybody has the same ultimate goal in mind. Everybody loves this city. That's why they're on the council. That's why they moved here and live here. That's why they work here, even if they don't live here. They're passionate about this city and they care about it. I think we all need to get together because we all see it from different perspectives and angles. And I think an annual retreat, so that everybody's on the same page. Everybody has a different role and everybody has different passions and skill sets. And I think something like that would be very beneficial. And I think the city manager would be the catalyst of being able to work with the council and the staff, because a lot of times it's adversarial in nature, just in all municipalities. But I think that is the key, is the city manager being able to mesh those two groups together for the good of the city.
Thank you. Ms. Phipps, what would you do to build a positive working environment with the council, staff, and residents?
Well, a lot of it would be training and education for council, specialized training in ethics and charter and things like that, and city staff as well. I think if everybody understands their roles, what they should and should not be doing ethically and morally, legally, I think if there was a very clear line that is not crossed, then it would make things a lot simpler. I think that there's been perhaps some overlap in those areas that shouldn't have occurred. So probably drawing those lines a little bit more clearly, and hopefully that would instill more trust in the residents. I think that trust has been eroded over the past several years quite a bit, and that's something that it's going to take quite a while to build back up again. But I think start with education.
Okay. Ms. Phipps, what is the responsibility of the council and mayor in managing the city's budget, and how would you administer it?
How would I administer budget management? Well, I think understanding it is where you start, making sure that you have a workable, feasible budget that works for the city. I think if you look at the 2019 budget, that's kind of the most telling one, is budgeting to spend almost every single dollar that you have is never good practice. And going through $4.5 million in reserves in such a short amount of time, putting the city in a really dangerous financial position as has happened, that's something that you have to ensure does not happen again. It really can't. At this point, it's going to take probably several years to build the reserves back up and get into more of a comfortable place again financially. And so I think making sure that there's understanding of the budget is where you start, that we know what we're talking about, we know what we're looking at, we have good numbers, and then making sure we have open lines of communication with the city manager and a strong financial officer, which we have now in Michael Vaughn. So I think all of those elements coming together are really going to help budgeting.
Okay. Mr. Westmoreland, what's the responsibility of the council and mayor in managing the city's budget, and how would you administer it?
It's no secret that we have made mistakes in regards to the budget. I'm not going to deny that. And there's a number of reasons why what you could point to. I'll shoulder those responsibilities. I think when you've been tried and tested and you've got the battle scars, you learn from mistakes, and I've definitely learned from mistakes. One of the things that we got tired of seeing is the budget being presented to us at the last minute without not ample time to be able to really study it. And it's not the easiest thing to look at, municipal budgets, because it is much larger than your family budget. And so we voted to have the city manager present the first draft of the budget by March 1st, so it would give council ample time to ask questions, study, and really go through the process. In 2017, we had a city manager that pulled several $1 million out of contingency funds, and that's really where the spending started. And so being able to get a hold of that and pump the brakes on that, that's what we're doing. We were able to get through the budget, and no one took a pay cut this year.
All right, thank you. Mr. Westmoreland, what role should Bethany's comprehensive plan have in determining Bethany's future?
I think it should play a massive role in it. It is a working, moving, breathing document, as many say, but the citizens of Bethany stepped up and invested about $100,000 to come up with this comp plan, and I think we need capital improvement plans and a 10-year plan that would actually help laser focus accomplishing the things that are in the Comp 2030 plan. It's a great plan. We know we need to be doing something. We need to generate more sales tax. We need the missing middle of housing. People are downsizing when they hit a certain stage of life, and they're leaving Bethany when they have income to be able to spend, and they don't have the housing here. And so we have developments that are going active right now, that they're starting the process that will be senior gated living, and we've made a lot of strides in this area. So, but I think it's very important the Comp 2030 plan become a reality and something that we're focused on every single day with all our decisions.
Okay. Ms. Phipps, what role should Bethany's comprehensive plan have in determining Bethany's future?
Well, I think that it's a good one, and so it should have a big role. I think that the problem that we run into is similar to the comprehensive plan of 1972 that Bethany had. It was a good, solid plan, but it wasn't followed. In many ways, the opposite of what they should have been doing is what ended up happening. And so we saw an overall decline in Bethany, not just economically, but as far as housing and everything goes. Like he said, there's a missing middle housing there, but I think the frustration is looking over the comp plan now that we have is it's not very flattering to Bethany as a whole when you go through it. And one of the things that it did highlight as a benefit for Bethany is actually something we've moved backwards on, which is trash. It said that we did have a very desirable trash service in the past with twice a week, and that was one of the things that was highlighted, but we've lost that recently. And in addition to the $1.5 million it took to implement the new trash service, that was also reduced services. So I think it is important to stay in line with the Comp 2030 plan as best we can.
Ms. Phipps, what are some past successes you can share that illustrate your leadership skills?
Well, one of the biggest ones was starting a business and pulling in contractors. That was not something that I anticipated doing, but I'm almost 3 years in at this point. Also stepping in and putting together groups to do volunteer work in and around the community is also something that I'm really proud of. And then being the vice president of member retention for the American Marketers Association for 2 years now. So all of those things kind of had me stepping up into a leadership role, and I'm really proud of them. And I'd like to hopefully continue that.
Okay. Mr. Westmoreland, some past successes you can share that illustrate your leadership skills?
Questions. I'm not afraid to question. I'm not going to turn a blind eye. The people voted me in this position, and no matter how comfortable it might make me or unpopular, I'm going to try to do the right thing. I've not always gone about it the right way, but I always try to do the right thing. I've asked questions about department head pay raises that were questionable, about contracts that weren't done according to the way they probably should have been done, and that isn't a popular thing. But you don't back down from doing what you know is right. To know the good you ought to do and not do it is sin, and I'm just not willing to do that. So I'll keep asking questions, and we'll keep pushing forward, and we'll keep trying to grow, and we'll keep trying to improve, and every single day we're going to get better and better and better. And so that's just what we're doing. And to address the trash comment earlier, we were asked behind closed doors, there were people trying to outsource our sanitation department. I wasn't willing to do that. That saves a few dollars initially, but people lose their jobs, and then you're in a hole, and that's not okay to me.
All right, thank you. Again, Mr. Westmoreland, to you, what kind of resources do you support for executing Bethany's marketing and communications? And what should be done to improve Bethany's communications with its residents?
I think there's a lot of things we can do to improve our communication. When I was elected, we implemented Facebook Live for our council meetings because at that point, the only two options to know what was going on was attend in person or watch Cox Channel 20, the PEG channel, the government channel. Not everybody in town has Cox cable, and so we wanted more people to be engaged. So we implemented that, but not everybody wants to be on Facebook. We started doing newsletters and the utility billing. So a lot of people were getting information that way. So you can't rely solely on social media, and there are things that we need to do to improve the communication. But I think just like in a marriage, that's something that you work on every single day. And if you fall asleep at it, you're going to struggle. And so communication is key, no matter if it's a marriage, whether it's with your children or whether it's with the municipal government and their citizens.
All right. Ms. Phipps, what kind of resources do you support for executing Bethany's marketing and communications? And what should be done to improve Bethany's communications with its residents?
Well, I think that the biggest thing you can do is start to communicate. I think there's been a lot of frustration in the community that there hasn't been any. And what communication we do have is sporadic. It's not always consistent, and it comes from multiple channels. So you have to dig a lot of times for information, and even then it's hard to find. They had, for a short time, done newsletters in the water bill to reach people offline. Those have since stopped with no word. They simply just stopped doing those. Facebook is fairly inconsistent. They don't post events really. Every once in a while, they recently started posting agendas. The website is a whole other issue, so I think communication in general is something that you have to try. Even if it's something that the citizens may or may not like to hear, you still need to tell them. And that's kind of a personal pet peeve of mine that I've had over the past few years, is it should not be so difficult to find financial records and different types of communication that is integral to our city, and something that we should be allowed to have access to.
Okay. And Ms. Phipps, again, Bethany's population is staying roughly the same while its demographics show it's growing older and more diverse. What initiatives would you employ to value this rich culture and create understanding and cooperation among Bethany residents?
Well, I think that we need to make the city more appealing and attractive. Aside from instilling confidence and trust in people, which is something that we've lost, we need amenities that appeal to the target market that we're looking to appeal to, the residents we currently have, in addition to the target market that we want to pull in, and things like utilizing our parks, making them more walkable, making the city as a whole more walkable. For that market, I would say transportation is a big one. That's been a huge issue over the years. Is reliable transportation if they no longer have a vehicle to get around the city, to get to the grocery store, to get to places where they need to go. So I think walkability, transportation, those are really two of the biggest ones. And then making Bethany more appealing, more events and activities and things like that where people can engage and get together and enjoy the 14 beautiful parks that we do have, especially Eldon Lyon.
Okay, Mr. Westmoreland, the question was, Bethany's population is staying about the same while its demographics show it getting older and more diverse. What initiatives would you employ to value this rich culture and create understanding and cooperation among Bethany's residents?
Well, I like what Ms. Phipps said about transportation. However, we looked into that a couple years ago, and to just have one bus route enter Oklahoma City into Bethany, it's like $250,000 to $300,000 a year. And I know that the city looked at that several years ago, and they just didn't feel like that was financially wise because they couldn't figure, how many people are using it versus what the city's investing in. So it's a good idea, but you got to be able to pay for it. The previous question and comment about communication, I'd like to touch on that. The newsletter was dropped. However, these are things that are staff responsibility, not council responsibility. And so we can, as a council, say we'd really like to see this happen or that happen, but it also requires staff trying to make that happen. And sometimes it's just not feasible or it's not going to work. But communication is key, but people don't understand a lot of times how the inner workings of how this stuff actually happens. But as far as our population, I'd love to see it grow, and I truly believe our duplex thing that we passed just recently at 36th and Divis is going to add to our population, as well as this garden home for senior living.
Okay. The next question back to you, Mr. Westmoreland, one that I think every city in the country asks. What can Bethany do to attract more homeowners and increase property values?
I think first of all, one of the things we did 4 years ago is we started stronger code enforcement for property owners, where it is they were letting their properties kind of with peeling paint and not upkeeping them like they should, and with debris around the homes. And so we started with code enforcement to try to encourage them to be able to, hey, show respect to your home. This is your investment and your neighbors and everything. And so I think you have to do that. You have to be cleaning up the neighborhoods. You have to be having amenities that people want to come and live here, but you have to have the housing as well. You need that missing middle, and that's something that we're addressing. But there's so many things that we can do to try to attract people to come and live here. That's happening currently. We've got great schools, we've got great community and great parks, like she said, and people want to raise their families here. Around my neighborhood, there are a lot of homes that are being torn down and larger homes being built, and that is raising people's property value.
Ms. Phipps, what can Bethany do to attract more homeowners and increase property values?
Well, I think, to echo what he said, I agree code enforcement, but I think you can't just simply say we're going to implement code enforcement. I think that you have to also offer people resources. So if you tell someone, well, you're out of compliance, we're going to fine you if you don't paint your house. If it's someone who's older and they don't have the ability to pay somebody else and they can't do it themselves, perhaps you put together, volunteers to go out and paint their house so that they comply with code enforcement. I think that it can be a wonderful thing, but you can also really alienate some of the members in your community if you're not very careful. But yes, overall, you want to create a really great aesthetic appeal for Bethany, and there are many areas that are not very aesthetically appealing. Because Bethany is landlocked in our 5.2 square miles, we also need to look at, as the comp plan says, infill and a lot of rehabilitation and taking those properties that we already have and rehabbing those and try and transition some of these neighborhoods to hopefully get a few people started so that the whole neighborhood in a few years can be rehabilitated.
Okay. This one, it's such a similar topic. I think we can do this one in 30 seconds. What would you support condemnation for any of Bethany's apartment complexes that are frequently out of code and put residents' health and safety at risk?
That's a tough one. I want to say yes, but with the caveat that you have to take the residents living there into account. It's not easy for them to turn around and immediately find somewhere else to live. So I think that if you look at something like that, because none of us want to see anyone living in unsafe, undesirable conditions, but you also have to understand that there's a reason they're in that position. So I think yes, but you have to allow a long enough time frame to allow for displacement of those residents elsewhere.
Mr. Westmoreland, what about you? Would you support condemnation for any of Bethany's apartment complexes that are frequently out of code and put residents' health and safety at risk?
Almost all of our apartments are owned by out-of-state investors that have most likely not even been here to look at the property and see how bad some of them can get. Yes, I would be willing to support that, but just like Ms. Phipps said, you have to be able to find a place or give ample time for those residents who are a part of the Bethany family as residents of the city of Bethany. So you can't just kick them out on the street. So that's not an easy fix, but you know, in order to improve the area, yeah, I think it's something that needs to be talked about. But those people need a place to live, a quality place to live.
Okay. Certainly the city doesn't run the school district, but how would you show support for education in all of Bethany's public schools? Mr. Westmoreland, 60 seconds.
A lot of people talk about Bethany Public School, which is the public school system, which is a great school system, but it is the smallest school district in the state and only makes up 20% of our students within our city. Putnam City makes up the other 80%. And I'm a strong supporter of education and our students. One of the reasons why we looked into trying to get a bus line into Bethany was because we wanted to be able to give the alt-ed students from PC schools that live just outside the busing circle, or just inside the busing circle, that can't get to school because they're living just inside a mile, and come inclement weather, they're not walking to school. A lot of them live with grandparents or relatives or friends because of situations with their family, and they only get 18 absences before they're failing school, and they're not being able to participate like other students. And we wanted to be able to give them an option to be able to get on a public bus free of charge so they could get to school. And that's what started that whole busing conversation and looking into the cost of that. So I'm a strong supporter of education, and we've got great schools here.
Ms. Phipps, what would you do to show support for all of Bethany's public schools?
I think that people outside of Ward 2 feel very disenfranchised when it comes to the school districts, and so many of them have echoed that they feel that none of the other schools, which there are several of in Bethany, really get any attention or resources given to them out if they are not in the Bethany School District. And I think that that's a real issue, and I think they're valid in a lot of ways. I think giving attention, resources, what resources we can to the other districts as well is very important, and not just focusing on one school district, which Bethany Public Schools are wonderful. But like I said, we have several other school districts as well. We've got Apollo, we've got Western Oaks, we've got Overholser, and I think that we can't forget them whenever we're looking at resources and like buses and things like that. The city, a few years ago when I worked there, we did a day where we went to Apollo schools, and we took the fire trucks, the police trucks, the public works vehicles, and we went out there and basically talked to the kiddos about different career paths that they might consider, and it has a large population in poverty, so I think being very inclusive for all of the districts.
Okay. Ms. Phipps, what economic development tools does Bethany need to be competitive in attracting new business?
Well, I think right now we have to build our confidence back up again. There's been a lot of bad PR over the last few years, and I think that there's a little bit of a fear that's settled in with developers and contractors and businesses. And as they look at Bethany and the issues we've had with investigations and, you know, budget shortfalls and things like that, so we have to alleviate those concerns and instill confidence back in those people that they can come and develop and grow in Bethany. And I think you really need a Kickstarter. TIF is not the answer to everything, but if it's done properly with the proper tools, a TIF could be a great Kickstarter potentially. We do have the Beta Committee as well, and once again, that could be a really good tool to kickstart something in the Bethany community that would still instill a little bit more confidence and encourage more developers and business owners to want to come here.
Mr. Westmoreland, what economic development tools does Bethany need to be competitive in attracting new businesses?
In 2017, when I was campaigning, that was one of the things that I spoke about. We need to be open for business. For years, there was a group of people that seemed to keep pushing economic development or development and developers away from the city, to the point that developers would talk to me and say we were running away from Oklahoma City. They're no longer doing that, regardless of investigations or anything like that. In 2017, we formed the Bethany Economic Development Authority, BEDA. We handpicked the 5 members on there, and they're doing a fantastic job. We had a BEDA meeting today, a matter of fact. And so they're doing a lot of things to try to be the catalyst and the fuel on the fire for economic development. A lot of the things that developers look at, quite honestly, is during council meetings and things like that, not just what's going on with the council, which that needs to be a different culture for sure, but the comments coming from the citizens because of whatever that meeting is and on the city Facebook page, and that turns off a lot of people, a lot of developers.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Westmoreland, over the last 20 years, most of Bethany's surrounding municipalities have grown significantly more prosperous. Why hasn't Bethany benefited from its geographically advantageous position as part of the booming Oklahoma City metro? And how would you change that?
Well, years ago, the leadership of Bethany did not want to grow in size of beyond this 5.2 square miles. I think that was an absolute mistake, because we could have grown. And then everybody liked back then being a bedroom community. That's what this was known as. They went to other cities like Oklahoma City to work, and they came here to live their life and raise their kids and enjoy life. But you can't generate sales tax that way. And so I feel like we're behind the gun trying to catch up, and that's the thing we've been pushing so hard for, is to be able to grow economically, and other cities around us have grown. War Acres is half our size, generates twice as much sales tax. They have a part of Northwest Highway. So there are things that we cannot fall asleep on like this city has done in the past, and that is economic development. There are people that don't think we can do it, but if you refuse to do it, and if you always say, well, it can't be done, then it's never going to happen. I believe in the impossible being possible.
All right, Ms. Phipps, over the last 20 years, most of Bethany's surrounding municipalities have grown significantly more prosperous. Why hasn't Bethany benefited from its geographically advantageous position as part of the booming Oklahoma City metro, and how would you change that?
Well, I think part of the biggest problem that I see is planning and intent. You have to be very intentional about what you do, and you have to plan for long-term goals and not be reactionary. And so, just like, again, referencing previous comp plans, if you spend all of these resources to procure a comp plan that you don't actually utilize, then you're failing in that regard, because that is a very tangible plan. It's a roadmap for you to take your city forward and grow, just like Yukon and War Acres and Edmond and the Village and surrounding cities are doing. I'm going to go ahead and assume that they have a very clear set out plan that they are utilizing. And the current comp plan that we have, like I said, it is a good plan, but I don't know that it's being utilized as it should be. There are a lot of things that we've kind of gone backwards on in some ways, and other things that have been ignored. So I think going back to having a plan and not being reactionary is really the best way to go about that.
Okay. I think we can do this one in 30 seconds. Ms. Phipps, how do you view Bethany's surrounding communities as more competitors or partners?
I think some competitors and some partners. I think War Acres has proven to be a very good partner over the years. Others, I don't know that they're competitors so much as they're kind of blowing us away in a little bit. Yukon is. They're growing exponentially, and so I don't know that that's necessarily a competitor. But I like to think that we have a really good relationship with Oklahoma City, I think, and War Acres as well. So kind of both.
Mr. Westmoreland, surrounding communities, do you see them as competitors or partners?
Both, absolutely both. I'm most competitive with my friends. They're still my friends, but I'm very competitive, and that's okay. You know, competition helps everybody grow. You know, War Acres is a fantastic partner. Yukon is a fantastic partner. We formed the Route 66 Tri-Cities Commission to bring economic development along our stretch of Route 66, the Mother Road. So they're fabulous partners, but we're all competitive because we're all passionate about our city. And if you're the mayor of your city, you better be loyal to your city.
All right. Mr. Westmoreland, in working to recruit new businesses, we often get feedback that council-approved policies on things like zoning and signage are restrictive and anti-business. What will you do to make Bethany more attractive and business-friendly?
We've been trying to do that for 4 years, and again, that is a team effort. That takes council, that takes being a dreamer, that takes thinking outside the box, and it takes staff and a city manager to help implement all of those things. My opponent used to work for the city. She knows how that works. And so it requires, it doesn't just rest on the mayor or the council, it requires the staff also implementing that. We've got a great community development director and team that is doing a fantastic job. But it's a lot of work because you're talking about dealing with Title 15 and all these different ordinances that have to line up. And for years, that was ignored. And we are trying to catch up to the modern times and be able to welcome people in. And obviously it's working because we have developers contacting us every day.
Ms. Phipps, to you, in working to recruit new businesses, there's a lot of feedback that council-approved policies on things like zoning and signage are restrictive and anti-business. What will you do to make Bethany more attractive and business-friendly?
I think drilling down to the core of our function, our policies and procedures, what it looks like, we need to look at the business and walk through that process with them and see how easy or difficult or convoluted it ends up being. As a business owner, the more time something takes me, the more it costs me. So if I have a process that with every other city takes me 10 minutes and it takes me 2 hours with the city of Bethany, that's going to be a huge turnoff, and I'm going to look to another city to go through that process in, because I'm not going to want to devote the additional time to a city that really makes a process convoluted and difficult when it really doesn't need to be. So I think just kind of drilling down to the base of our core services and what does that process look like, maybe just pretend you're a business and walk through it and be really simple with it and say, okay, is this needed? Is that needed? How can we clean this policy up and make it a little bit simpler?
All right. Ms. Phipps, tourism is certainly always a sales tax driver. What attractions does Bethany need to generate more tourism, and how can it get them?
Well, I think that we have a really huge underutilized resource in Eldon Lyon. It's a lot of space, but there's really not much there. It's kind of a field. It can be utilized for festivals and concerts and different things like that. Route 66 is great, and I certainly love the Mother Road, but I think you also need to look at 23rd Street and all of the other areas around Bethany that really could hold some really good attractions and amenities that people would want to go and interact with. I think trying to bring back the Freedom Fest like Matt Goodwin is trying to do, highlighting Eldon Lyon, just doing different things like that that don't necessarily have to cost an arm and a leg, but can still be something fun for the community to come together and bring people outside of the community to Bethany to see what we have to offer.
All right, Mr. Westmoreland, what attractions does Bethany need to generate more tourism, and how can it get them?
Well, as far as she mentioned the Freedom Festival, 4 years ago when I got elected, staff asked me to do away with the Freedom Festival because it cost us $60,000, $70,000 a year to put on, and we couldn't show that we were really generating any sales tax benefit from it. We never broke even, and a couple times it got rained out. So that's not financially very wise. But we did bring it back. We were trying to bring it back. I'm the one that appointed Matt Goodwin as the chair to bring back this committee. We even voted as a council to go through OMAG training, get the $10,000 they pay us, give that as a donation to this committee as seed money so they could go raise the funds to put on the Freedom Festival. During COVID, council wanted to vote and put that $10,000 in a general fund. I'm going to push to redo that back the way it originally was, because I think the Freedom Festival should come back. We have a Veterans Monument that is going to be going in on Route 66 and Donald Street that will stop traffic and cause people, as far as tourism, give us something that people can stop and look at. We have the Blue Goose that is a first prototype to Air Force One that will be going into Eldon Lyon Park. Council has approved that happening, and that will be very exciting when we unveil that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Westmoreland, would you propose or support any bond initiatives in the future? And if so, for what? And if not, why not?
Yes, I would. That's something that I've been trying to have a conversation with, and I've talked to several people. We've met with different bond attorneys. Oklahoma City does a good job of doing these rolling GO bonds every few years. They keep their mill level at a certain amount. The city of Bethany had a pretty much zero mill level because we didn't ever do these GO bonds until this facility that we're setting in right now. And so you have to be able to pay those bonds down. But then I think every few years you roll something out that benefits everybody. You've got the feel-good stuff, the connecting sidewalks, the amenities, but you have to address the streets and infrastructure. And so those things have to be a part of it. It's so expensive to do that it's going to take GO bonds rolling those things out. We're not going to generate enough sales tax to be able to do all the things we need to do, not just what we want to do. So yes, I would totally support that as long as we could keep the mill level to a manageable area for all of us, what we're going to have to pay.
All right, thank you. And I'll just say for those in the audience who might not be familiar with some of those terms, a GO bond that you mentioned is a general obligation bond. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you want to take 2 seconds to explain mill level?
Well, you know, your property value, and I'm not the most educated on it, believe me, but your property value, you pay a certain amount, and you're paying back like this bond that we have for this library. I forget the total amount, but you know, several $1 million, 12 million, 10 million, I forget. But it's going to take a few years before our property taxes begin to pay that down. And then instead of going down to zero and we don't owe anybody any money anymore, fantastic, we got a great library. We should be doing this on a 7-year, 10-year rolling scenario, to where we keep that at a manageable level, whatever that mill level is, and always have these things that are going. Oklahoma City's doing it. That's why you see all the streets being redone.
So mill level is a percentage applied to property values.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Phipps, same question, and in fairness, take an extra 15 or 30 seconds if you want to answer the question. Would you propose or support any bond initiatives in the future? If so, for what? And if not, why not?
Definitely. I think they're lifeblood for a city to accomplish big things like a $7 million library, which I think this is actually our only GO bond in the city, and the rest are revenue bonds, which I think the infrastructure would probably fall under a revenue bond, which is supported by sales tax. But absolutely, I think that obviously you have a limit on the number of bond issues that you can have out at one time, but you can also refinance all of those and kind of save some money in that way, roll them all together, and kind of increase your spending ability with regard to bonds, much like refinancing a home. But I think it's assessing where your limit is at and what you have available with regard to bonds. I think that a rolling bond with regard to infrastructure, something that we constantly have an infrastructure bond, is really important, because that is something that hasn't been maintained for so many years in Bethany. It's kind of spotty. Lift stations and water lines and stormwater drainage and all those different things. They have improvements here and there, but it's something that needs to just be consistently always in the budget. And I think bonds are a great way to go about doing something that is that expensive.
All right, Ms. Phipps, what is the role of trust in leadership, and can it be regained when it's lost?
I think trust in council right now is very low. I do think that it can be regained. I think it takes time. As with anybody in personal relationships, when you lose trust, it takes time to gain it back, and it takes a lot of work and effort. The city has to gain back the trust of the citizens, and they're going to have to put in a lot of effort to do that. And a great way to start with that is communication. Communication. I can't say that enough. Give them the information they want. Don't make it difficult for them. Provide it freely and give it to them in multiple avenues. You want to see our financial records? You should have no issues showing residents the financial records. It is the citizens' money that funds this city. So it shouldn't be that difficult to dig through and find those financial records. It should be something that they post frequently and often. And so I think communication is a great place to start, and I think asking forgiveness doesn't hurt either.
Thank you, Mr. Westmoreland. What is the role of trust in leadership, and can it be regained when it's lost?
I believe it's everything, and I believe it can be regained. The past 4 years has been very challenging. Everybody knows that trust is, there's been a lot of trust broken. There's been citizens that don't trust the council. There's council that we struggled trusting staff. and we've gone through city managers as a result of that. If you don't have trust, then it's going to mess some things up. But I do know it can be rebuilt. I've got relationships that have been rebuilt. Trust can be rebuilt. God can do anything. The situation with our city managers simply came down to trust, and council voted because of broken trust to eliminate city managers, and that was very challenging. Like I said, there's been trust broken because of not getting full information from staff at times, and that broke trust with council. But it's being rebuilt right now.
All right, thank you. We're down to our last question. So you get a minute for this one, and it's pretty wide open. Why should voters elect you and not your opponent, Mr. Westmoreland?
I believe voters should elect me over my opponent because I've been here 4 years. I've treated this like a full-time job, passionately for the citizens of Bethany. I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm clearly not afraid to be investigated because I'm going to ruffle feathers. I believe that every one of us can grow, and iron sharpens iron, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. I didn't work for the city. I've been concerned for the citizens out of the goodness of my heart and the time that I've given. I don't have a vendetta. I want to see the citizens of Bethany have the greatest city that they can call home. And so that's why I decided to run again. That's simply it. I'm passionate. I've got the battle scars to prove it. As you know, I'm not going to cower and run away from any challenge. We faced the challenge of our budget, and no employee took a pay cut. We didn't run away. We faced it just like we faced every single challenge, and I'll do the same every single day for the citizens.
All right, thank you. Ms. Phipps, why should voters elect you and not your opponent?
Well, I would have to say that I think those battle scars are probably more carried by the residents of Bethany. I think that we have seen very unethical behavior. We've seen fiscal irresponsibility, and my opponent has said many times he's not a numbers guy. That's a huge problem when the main function of your position is numbers, knowing and understanding, comprehending numbers. And so I think that there's a skill level there that's lacking, but at the end of the day, as I tell every voter, please get out and vote, but do your research first. Understand who you're voting for and why. And if you have questions, reach out to them and ask them. Have a conversation with them. I would encourage them to look at the things that have been released over the past several years, the investigation, the lawsuit, a number of different things. And I would say that I'm running because I'm passionate about Bethany and I care about its future. And I would encourage anyone who would like to have a conversation to reach out.
All right, thank you. We're going to take 1 minute each for closing remarks. And Ms. Phipps, it falls to you to go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought that was closing. So, just to reiterate, I'm running because I started out as a concerned citizen, and now I really want to do some good in Bethany. I have a long history in government, about 15 years, and a lot of that was dealing with budgets and finance, which just goes along with a government job. So I think I have a lot of applicable experience that will serve me well if I'm elected. And I have had so many conversations over the past few weeks with residents, and it's been wonderful, and I want to continue to encourage that. So please do, anyone and everyone, reach out if you'd like to have a conversation, grab some coffee. I'd love to speak with you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Westmoreland, 1 minute for closing remarks.
First of all, I'd like to thank the citizens of Bethany for electing me 4 years ago. It's a total honor, and it's humbling, and it's been definitely a learning experience. However, I will say that whether it's 15 minutes or 15 years of government experience as an employee, that is not the same as being an elected official. And so as an elected official, we have 20,000 bosses, essentially, and with our citizens. And you're not going to be able to please everybody. That's something I quickly learned. And you're going to have to stand on your own convictions. You're going to have to be able to decide if you're going to stand up for what you believe in and vote accordingly and not be afraid. And I think I've proven that. I think that people that know me know my character, and they know that I'm willing to fight for the citizens of Bethany. I'm passionate about it. I'm competitive because I want the city of Bethany to be better than every other city around here. And I believe that we are, but I believe we need to grow our sales tax and all of that. But I vote for me because I love you.
All right, thank you both. We're going to turn it back to Jill to close this out. Before we do, I'll just take a minute to thank you both for your very thoughtful answers, for your civility and respect for both tonight's forum and toward each other, and for giving us complete and polite responses to the questions. And again, to the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber for putting this together, and the Bethany Library for hosting us tonight. And thanks for inviting me to moderate. Jill?
Well, Mr. Strueli, we want to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this evening, and really just for your insight and wisdom in evaluating all of this. We want to thank the citizens of Bethany, especially those that took the time to send us some questions and really provide the inspiration for which topics we covered. There's so many things going on, and it's hard to figure out what all to be covered. And we do want to thank the library, and particularly Rhonda Banks, the Bethany librarian here, and her whole team for making this space available. I understand that we have had some technical difficulties. We tested the bandwidth, but apparently everybody in town is on right now, and so it didn't work quite as well. We've recorded all of this, and we will be posting the recorded version for everyone to access throughout the next several weeks. So never fear, everything is still here. And with that, on behalf of the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber, we want to say thank you to both of you. Putting your name on the line is a big deal. It's real easy to sit around and complain, and it's really hard to take the bumps and go on. And both of you have, and I just really appreciate both of your willingness to serve our citizens.
Thank you.
Good evening.